Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for an episode with one of America's premier architectural photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent interview with American architectural photographer Jack Zigon. Today's interview was conducted by AIAP Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
Good morning and welcome to Photographer's Life. We're happy to be talking this morning with Jack Zigon, and he's a Philadelphia photographer, veteran architectural photographer. And welcome, Jack. We're glad to have you on the program this morning.
Thanks, Alan. It's good to be here.
So, Jack, I'm curious to know, before we get too far into this, as far as the nuts and bolts of photography, that why in the beginning photography? What drew you to this medium, or has it always been something that you've done?
Well, my father was a leather craftsman. He worked for Bella, Pennsylvania, but he carved leather and shot photographs for the articles that he published, how-to articles. And he gave me a camera when I was 12, and I started playing with it, and I loved it. And then when I started running a publishing firm at one point, the graphic artist offered to teach me. And so in my 20s, I had a professional take me down the road of how to do film photography. And so I was, pretty much hooked on it from an early age. I did a lot of landscape photography and actually sold prints for years. But found it really wasn't all that good way to earn money. I said, okay, that's fun. I'll do that for fun and I'll sell prints whenever. But, there's got to be a better way to do this. So, no, I've been doing it for, 40 years. And because I've got an engineering background also, I just love the built environment. I love designing things. I love building things. And capturing it on digitally is it's just a blast. I love it.
Interesting. Let's back up just a little bit there, because it sounds like you had some professional experience before you decided that you were going to be a photographer. And can you kind of take us down that road as to what your professional life has looked like from say from college on?
Well, this is my 7th career.
Okay.
Not my 7th job, my 7th career. Each one has been different, but there's a theme. I ran a publishing firm. I was a management consultant. I sold computer hardware. I had my own management consulting firm for about 18 years. I worked as a Jewish community relations lead. I did public relations work for Israel. And finally, I ran internet marketing for Comcast Business and grew that to like a $1.6 billion division. Mm-hmm. And then they decided they didn't need me anymore. And, so I became a professional photographer. Okay. So the theme is technology, building things, doing something new, learning constantly. Yeah. But yeah, I've done a few things over my careers.
So it sounds like your interests have kind of touched on, tangents of photography the whole way through, and technology and those kinds of things.
The publishing firm was just an opportunity to work side by side with another professional who happened to have the skills. I was running marketing and product development for the company. And we happened to be in an old restored mill next to a waterfall. My office looked out in the woods. And so I was constantly bringing my camera and taking photographs of the water wheel and the waterfall. And I was up in New England. And I just loved taking photographs. I, always had my camera with me. So it really wasn't tied to the publishing firm necessarily, but that person had the skills, and I wanted him to teach me. And I'd go shoot a roll and would put it on the light table, and he'd say, "Well, what are you trying to do here?" Uh,
Real
well,
gentle.
tell them, and you go, well, you didn't quite do it. Here's what you needed to do. I'd go out and shoot another roll.
That's great. One thing that occurs to me is that your business acumen has served you well as a photographer. You've got a track record as a very successful businessman. And I'm wondering, at least in your mind, how does that fit into your success as a photographer?
Absolutely critical. I mean, the fact that I ran a small business for 18 years, I knew how to do proposals. I knew how to reach out. I did computer hardware sales. So I knew how to cold call and write proposals to sell computer systems. So it's been a natural, because I did internet marketing at Comcast, it was like, okay, I need the email addresses of 1,800 architects in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And I know how to build a campaign. I knew how to create websites. So it's the way that I broke into the business, given that I didn't start in architectural photography when I was 20. But it's really enabled me to, pick who I want to work for, target them, and how to reach out to them in paper, by mail, in email, by phone, in person, until I close the deal and then satisfy them and, get another job from them. So and just collections, how to make sure you get the money up front, all of that stuff. Of course, there are some twists like licensing. I published 3 books, so I understand intellectual property and making sure that you get paid for your work whenever somebody uses it without paying for it. And so I understood how that worked. I just had to figure out how to do it with photographs. And thank you for letting me know about Pixie.
My pleasure.
It worked really well.
I'm glad to hear that. This is an interesting subject, and we seem to talk about it with all of the photographers that we've interviewed so far. And it's about, for me, what the curriculum was that you either consciously or unconsciously went through for yourself to bring you to the point where you're a successful architectural photographer. And I've yet to interview anyone who started out in art school and ended up, as a successful architectural photographer with a national reputation or international. That is not a logical continuum. And so I'm interested to know how that worked out for you. Did you start out thinking at some point that you'd be where you are right now?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Every 3 years, I wanted to do something different.
Okay.
And so having my own business allowed me to do that. So that's the other theme, that there's been constant change, constant learning. When I was running the publishing firm, that gave me an opportunity to learn direct mail marketing.
Okay.
Accounting, business management in general. And then I learned sales in computer sales, figuring out how to, prospect and how to cold call. Each of the things that I've done built and taught me things, usually the school of hard knocks. I didn't get an MBA like my son, so I don't know it from a formal standpoint, but I've tried 1,000 things. I've failed at 900 of them, but 100 of them have worked.
Yeah.
And so
sounds like very well. Yeah.
And I've always been a technical person.
Okay.
I've been using Apple computers since they were called Lisa. So that's been 40 years.
Wow.
I had one of those on my
You had a Lisa? Oh, okay.
I had a Lisa. So it's a natural thing to always be. And the camera I've got is a computer with a lens on the front of it. I mean, it's and a very powerful computer at that. So it's the kind of thing that I think it's important to, I learned at an early age, you had to learn business, you had to learn marketing, and you had to learn your trade, whatever that was, whatever that specialty was. And I've had a chance to learn how to run a business, how to do marketing. And this is the latest trade that I've worked on very hard over the last 9, 10 years, to have the skills to be able to, perform well for architects, developers, and so on. But it was only adding the photography skills on top of other things that allowed me to be successful as a photographer.
Yeah. So you're telling me that you've only been doing this for 10 years as an architectural photographer?
Yes.
Is that accurate? Okay. Because I've been to your portfolio a number of times, and it doesn't look like somebody who's been in the business 10 years. So you look like you've been
thank you.
Your whole life. And your work is amazing.
I do have, there is a photograph right here that is the first architectural photograph I took probably 45 years ago. It's a barn. I will say the landscape photography taught me a tremendous amount about how to deal with light. I can't control the sun, but I had to know where it was, when it was going to be, where I wanted it to be, what the quality of the light needed to be, and then how to use Photoshop and all the layering that's necessary to produce beautiful landscape photographs. In fact, I've been hired as an architectural photographer because of my landscape photography.
Interesting.
I had one guy tell me specifically, because of what he saw in my personal work, that's why he wanted me to shoot his buildings.
That's great.
And so I've kept that on my website. Other people have told me, get that off of there. That's not important.
Obviously,
so those skills,
yeah,
those skills really helped when it came time to capture the built environment.
That's interesting that you should say that. There's a number of people that, in the AIAP who spent time taking workshops like, years ago, the Ansel Adams, or, people since then, John Sexton and other people like that. And there's not a building in sight for those workshops, but what you're saying about understanding the light seems to be the key to that. That you understand quality of light and time of day, and those things are so critical that you just don't roll up on a building and make a great photograph. It takes some planning and some intuition and some understanding of what that environment's all about. And so that's interesting. It just occurs to me now, the fact that I've had this conversation before, that it's really something about landscape photography that gives a person a certain intuition about architectural photography.
And it's also the vision thing.
Okay.
We talked about in the last meeting, that
that
knowing ahead of time what photo I was trying to create, and therefore I wanted to be in this position at this time on this day. And my sun seeker software would tell me the sun was going to rise right here. I'm sitting there in the dark, waiting for the sunrise to come up. But I had in my head, this is the photo I'm trying to capture, and I scouted it the day before, and so that's the same as I used to with architecture. Except it was not nature that built it; it was some woman or man who decided to design and build this.
Yeah, and I think that this is a little bit divergent, but I think that's one of the things about landscape photography that people may not really understand, those who do it at such a high level. It's not just, it just happened that you were there at that time. There was a lot of planning that went into you being there at that time with that light and all those kinds of things, that you just, there's this philosophy of the found object and all those kinds of things. And it's very artistic to think of it in those ethereal terms, but it's not very practical if you want to make a living at it. So that's very interesting. I'm kind of struck by the fact that your business and technology background is so key in what you do, that there's that component which you're very strong at, but you're obviously very strong as a talented photographer. That's talent's not something you teach, and it's not something that you necessarily can learn. You obviously had some inborn understanding, and you developed a vision that lets you meld those two things together, so that as a businessman, you were able to couple that with your talent and love of photography and make a go of things, because not many people after 10 years are at the spot that you're at now. So that's remarkable.
Well, it's almost as if I have a compulsion to take photographs. I mean, as I was in New York City yesterday with my wife, visiting the Museum of Modern Art and the.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
I was in the snow in Utah.
So I'm walking through town and I'm taking pictures with my brain. I'm seeing compositions constantly. I'm watching the shadow. And I did bring a camera, and it's a little Fuji that I point and shoot 100V. But I'm taking pictures constantly with my brain, and sometimes I wish I had the camera up to my eye whenever I take the picture, because it's gone, the fleeting moment. The person was there, and the light was there, but I'm constantly seeing things as if I were photographing them. Just while I'm walking down the street or looking out my window right now, I'll see how the light is hitting the plants and the fence, and I'll be thinking, oh yeah, there's a vertical shot there. We could,
Interesting.
So I'm sort of wired that way.
Yeah.
And this is giving me an opportunity to use it in a way that none of my other really careers did. This is letting me exercise that artistic part that's always been there, and I exercised it as a writer or a designer, but not as an artist. The landscape photography, notwithstanding. So, and I can do it, and somebody will pay me for it fairly well too.
Yeah, that's remarkable, isn't it? Well, it's interesting. Photographers, I think, are such a unique blend of right and left brain strong points, and successful ones. Let's say that. I've seen some remarkable photography from people who work at Home Depot. They can't make the things work together, and but they can't do it consistently either. But and I'm sorry, Home Depot, if anybody from the corporate is listening. That was just an example, not meant to just mean anything bad by that. But looking back kind of at your career path, if you had to put together, say, a curriculum for architectural photographer students, if somebody wants to go into architectural photography, what would be your advice to someone like that? Say that they're in their 20s.
Get a business degree, because you're going to be running a small business, and it's a specific set of skills. So you need to know accounting, you need to know marketing, you need to know sales, and then you can layer on the artistic, the technical stuff. Okay, what's a tilt shift lens do, and what's an f-stop, and how to use off-camera lighting, and how to use natural light, how do you blend it in Photoshop, all that stuff. You can learn, and you don't really need a degree to do it. So it would be business, marketing, and sales, and then the technical, aspect. I did have a chance to work with a couple of photographers. I only did it once each. But I've taken so many online courses that I paid for, not the YouTube stuff, although there is some good YouTube stuff out there. But Mike Kelly's work in the 4 or 5 video series that he has in architectural photography. It's just fantastic, and I'd watch it several times, and then I'd go out and shoot and use what I learned, and I'd come back. And Elia Liccardi's work from F-Stoppers on landscape photography, and especially the editing. All of that you can learn in, I'm going to say, a year. If you just spent all of your time watching, shooting. But I'm also the kind of person I can, read a technical manual and do it. So it's not everybody can do that. They might need to work with a person.
Yeah.
So I guess those would be the main things for me. And I would put more of an emphasis on the business and the marketing and sales.
Yeah.
Because you don't even have to be really, really good. You just have to be good enough, and you can make a living. Now, obviously, if you're really, really good, you can make even more, the top 1%, but you don't have to be the best artist in the world to make a living. That's just my experience.
Interesting. I appreciate that. I'm kind of in the same camp as far as my feelings about how you get from A to B as an architectural photographer. It's not a popular point of view with academics and people that run photography schools and things like that. But I think it's, as a practical matter, everybody that I've gotten to know very well in this industry has come that route, actually. And there's a large number of them who came up as architects and love the photography side of it enough to make that jump and stop drawing and start shooting. And so that's been interesting. But the ability to run a business seems to be the key point here, that it's just so critical to be able to find success as a photographer. You first have to understand how to be a small businessman. And I think a lot of people don't understand that we're all, small business owners. That's a surprise to people that want to come and assist or, intern or whatever, those kinds of things. Let me ask you about clients. Your client acquisition, it sounds like that's something that comes natural to you. You're able to figure that out. What type of client do you choose to work for? I'm just curious. What is it that makes you happy?
So I prefer shooting modern buildings.
Okay.
When I've been in Europe or Italy or whatever, the old architecture just didn't turn me on. I think I shot one church in Italy, one inside, one outside. That was it. 2 photos, I'm done. But I did a lot of landscape photography. No, I aim for architects whose work really turns me on. I look at it and go, wow, I would love to shoot that. For the most part, they tend to be modern.
Okay.
I target 25 a year that I would like to work for. I find their websites, I take a look at their work and say, I want to work for them. I've put together a printed portfolio booklet that I mail to them, and with a letter that says, I liked your project A and your project B because of reasons C and D. You can see what my work looks like. I'd like to shoot your work. And then I follow up. But I've worked for architects, builders, developers, interior designers, landscape architects, stonemasons, cabinet makers, lighting manufacturers, commercial kitchen designers, lighting designers, schools, a solar power company. Anybody who needs photos. But they're not who I would target necessarily.
Okay.
They sort of come by referrals, or I always do, cost sharing. And so, I end up the engineer who
Yeah.
has designed X, Y, and Z, and then I'll come back to the engineer later and say, hey, do you have any projects that the architect didn't want to shoot but you want done?
Okay.
And so I ended up photographing the installation of a 500-ton boiler for a university in stop motion video and stills.
Oh, interesting.
Because the engineer needed it. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm shooting from the top of buildings, and 3 cameras. And he said, can you do that? And I went, oh, yeah, sure. And then quickly I'm YouTubing. How do you do that?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Oh, no. No, I've got a lot of confidence. Oh, yeah, sure, I can do that. No problem. Can you show me one? No, there's NDAs. I can't really. But now if somebody asks about it, sure, here's what it looks like. So it is a very targeted thing. I mean, that's one of the things I learned in sales. You target your best prospects. And for me, it's their work turns me on. I look at it and go, wow. I'd like to shoot stuff like this. I love mid-century modern residential homes. In fact, there was one woman who specializes that here in the city, and so when I did real estate photography, I was her go-to person, and I loved every job I got from her.
That's great.
So, does that answer your question?
It does.
I rambled a bit.
Yeah, and I hear different things from different people about that, but in my mind, if something is visually interesting to you, it's always easier to shoot that. And it's easier to do great work in a situation where you really enjoy what it is you're photographing. And for the most part, that is the case for a lot of what we do. I don't shoot boilers necessarily, but last month I shot a prison. So, there are those things that you have to fill in the cracks with.
Absolutely. No, I've shot boring things. There's no doubt, but and I wouldn't have targeted the boiler. But when it gave me a chance to learn how to do stop action video. And so I have a new skill in my kit bag. I'll pull that out whenever somebody, an architect wants to see something in motion. That happens over a 3 or 4 hour period, not like a building coming up out of the ground. I don't do that kind of stop motion where the camera's there for months and months.
Interesting.
But,
that's great. Are there jobs that you just won't take? Maybe you shouldn't tell me this.
I don't do real estate photography anymore. That business, I built it up. I trained my son and turned the business over to him.
Oh, great.
And there is one realtor that if she asks, I will shoot for her. In fact, she asked last week and said, a friend of yours is selling their house and they've requested you. Will you do it? And I said, I promised you, because you helped me start my business, I would forever. If you ask, I will shoot. And she knows that. But I don't do real estate listings anymore. They don't pay well. They want too much, too fast. I can do it in my sleep, but I choose not to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Other than that, no, I'm going to shoot some ponds, waterfall ponds that a guy built.
Interesting.
He asked, okay, I'll try that. I'll shoot some meadows that a landscape architect designed, both in video flying through the meadow, as well as stills at early morning or late in the day.
Interesting.
Especially if it makes me do something new I've never done before. I love it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get that. Entirely. You are obviously using a drone. Has that been something that's recent, or how long have you been?
I've had 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And what forced it was I was shooting with like a 25-foot pole, putting a camera on top of it to get some solar panels. And I was able to shoot for GE Solar one job. And then they said, if you don't have a drone, you can't shoot for us anymore. And I said, okay, I'll get a drone. I'll figure out how to do it. I'll get licensed. I'll get, insurance. And then they said, oh, we hired somebody internally to do it, so we're not going to hire anymore anyway.
Oh God.
But when a client says, unless you can do A, we won't work with you, you learn A.
Yeah.
And the DJI drones are just incredible.
They are. Yeah.
I've got a little one. It's not, they just came out with a giant one this past week that filmmakers would use.
The new Inspire. That's a nice one.
Yeah, $16,000 to start.
And a lens. And the lens. Then you add the lens. Yeah, that is an amazing platform. How big of a deal is equipment to you? I mean, do you buy a lot of new gear? Do you upgrade regularly? How important is it to kind of stay on the edge of things equipment wise for you?
So my father taught me that you always want to have the best tool for the job.
Okay.
As a leather craftsman, he was using tools to tool leather, and there were specific tools for specific tasks. And so as soon as the Canon R came out and I could switch to mirrorless and have a decent platform that I could attach a tilt shift lens to, I knew that's where I was going to go. Having higher resolutions, I went to the R5 whenever that came out and kept the R as a backup body. But then I've always used Fuji cameras for my personal work. And when the Fuji came out with the 100S, which is a much smaller body, but a 100 megapixel sensor, and I didn't have to buy a phase one.
Exactly.
Which Jeff Totaro uses. It was like, okay, I want to try that because I like the look of it. I like the look of the Fuji glass is wonderful. It's always been incredibly sharp. I mean, they make lenses for Hollywood that cost as much as my house. So they know how to make glass. So I tend to acquire equipment to do a job. And if it turns out I don't use it, I sell it, and I'll buy it. I'll buy it used, or in the case of things that I know I'm going to hang on to for a long time, I'll buy it new.
If I'm hearing you right, that if it makes a difference in the way you work or the way the photograph looks, then you do it. That's the decision maker. There's no cool factor to it. It's it's a practical factor.
It has to do something. Now that doesn't mean I won't try something that that seems cool and might be useful, and then I'll try it and go, that doesn't really work. I always carry a drone. I just did a shoot of a wind tunnel for a university, and the architect that had designed the space had the 3 shots they wanted. 2 of them worked. One of them, when we got in the space, didn't work, and they said they didn't like it. I said, well, what if I put a drone up in the corner and we shoot from down? They went, you can do that? And so I, got my drone and flew it inside and, got a shot that they went, wow, that's great. That really shows the wind tunnel and how we've shoehorned it into this space. Unfortunately, the drone slammed into the wall, broke the propellers, and fell. And you take out your new propellers, you put them on, and you put it up again and shoot it. They were amazed that I had backup propellers. I said, "You always have backups. I mean, come on."
I have a backup drone, so
I do too.
Yeah,
I don't always bring it.
Yeah,
I bring 1 drone, generally not 2. I didn't expect to use the drone here, but since I had it, I just went back out to the car, grabbed it, brought it in, and so I'd always go somewhere with the drone and 2 bodies and all the lenses and lights. You never know what you're going to need. You need to make sure you have it.
And it's nice to have those options. And frankly, I think that a client is impressed, and there's a sense of loyalty after that when you pull something out of the bag for them that they weren't expecting, and that really is an amazing shot. And it sounds like that indoor drone shot was just that. That's always nice to have that capability. What kind of a client mix do you have? Are you working primarily for architectural firms, interior designers, corporations? What kind of a mix do you have right now?
I'd say the majority of it is architects.
Okay.
Then the cost sharing is what gets the other folks,
Okay.
whether it's the engineers or the landscapers or whomever, but it starts with the architects.
Okay.
But then I will, approach the lighting design company afterwards to say, do you have any other jobs that the architect didn't shoot?
Yeah.
Or the architect wanted photos that don't match your needs.
Oh, okay.
And that's how I shot this 190-year-old church in Philadelphia, because it got a whole new lighting system that the lighting designer wanted to highlight for a competition. But I had shot for an architect that used this lighting designer 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
So they knew my work. And when I said, hey, do you have something else? They said, oh yeah, we wish we could shoot this church. The architect only cares about their renovations. They don't care about the lighting. And so it starts with architects, but then branches out because of all the other players that are involved in designing and building the structures.
That's interesting that you had that conversation. I think that's a missed opportunity for a lot of photographers, that they don't have the conversation with the other players on a project. And a lot of the time that would mean that you needed to maybe make that shoot substantially larger than it was going to be for the architect, say, if you have that conversation ahead of time. But like you say, then you've got these other jobs that you add on the back end, and those are a bonus situation like that. Would it be safe to say that when you target new clients or people you'd like to work for, that those are primarily architects then?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. That and then they are it feeds off of them. That leads me to a kitchen designer. But the architect brought me in to shoot the renovation of the house, and the kitchen designer said, no, we want this for our portfolio also. So it's starting with 25 architects who are doing work that I want to photograph. And so it's nice whenever I go to them and say, I love your work. By the way, I've shot a few of them. You want to see?
Yeah, that doesn't hurt either. How much is pricing a factor at this point in your career? Do you find yourself concerned a lot about what that price point is that you charge, or are they hiring you more because of the work? Or how does price factor into that?
I have lost jobs because they've said I'm more expensive than the person they used, and that's fine. I'm willing to walk away from that. I would like to be hired for the look, for the vision, and have somebody say, well, a couple $100 one way or the other doesn't matter. I know you're going to produce something that's beautiful. So somebody who says my prices are too high, I'm like, okay, here's some other photographers you can contact, go and be well.
I like that.
Yeah, that's not an issue that I'm really concerned about.
And it's interesting that you say that, and I kind of want to punctuate that, because there's a lot of talk, a lot of email that I get personally, people asking about price, other photographers, let's say, and wondering, am I charging too much? Should I be charging more? That kind of thing. And that's a hard balance to strike, really, I think. And experience is really what seems to teach it. But are there any pricing guidelines that you use for yourself? You don't have to divulge what they are. I mean, do you have profitability aims that you use for a job?
The line items that show up on my invoices or my estimates. It's going to be a creative fee that's,
Okay.
for a day's work. Rarely will I do a half day because a half day never happens. I mean, with
No.
all the conversations before and after, I
No.
have to block out the whole day anyway. So I've got the creative fee, which includes my licensing,
Hmm.
and that includes everything except advertising, any use, and it's unlimited worldwide forever.
Okay.
I don't put any restrictions on it from that standpoint. The second thing is an editing fee per photo.
Okay.
So that, and if we shoot it on site, I edit it and I charge. And so we go in with we want 6 photos of this. We're on site. We can make it 7 or 8 or make it
Hmm.
5. I'm comfortable with modifying it, but there's a charge to edit that photo
Yeah.
because I'm going to take the time to light it with and without lights and everything, everything. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to shoot 50 and you get to pick the 10 you want. That doesn't work, at least not for me. I'm sure there are
No.
people who do that, and that's their business model. Then I've got an assistant.
Okay.
Every interior job, I use an assistant. If it's exteriors only, generally I don't, because
Mhm.
I don't really need the assistant. And I add a rental, an equipment fee.
Okay.
And, it's basically saying I make sure I've got the best equipment for the job,
Hmm.
and there's a charge that I use to renew my equipment over time, make sure I've got
Yeah.
a good drone or whatever, and I'll remove it if somebody says, well, we don't do that, but if I really want to do the job, fine, I'll take that off. It's something I'll give up, but for the most part, I keep it in. And then there might be, travel and expenses, if I've got to
Right.
go somewhere, I'll charge for my travel time at a lower rate, and, hotel and food and, all
Hmm.
that stuff.
Okay.
Um, so those are the line items that are there. And to my knowledge, those are competitive rates for the Philadelphia area.
Okay.
Um, I know there are people who charge more and there are people who charge less,
Hmm.
so I'm going to say I'm probably somewhere in the middle based on the research I've done.
Okay. How much of your work is local and how much travel do you do?
I would say the majority of it's within, 50 or 100 miles of Philadelphia.
Okay.
I've gone as far as up into Connecticut and down into Virginia.
Hmm.
Um, but it's regional
Oh,
and local for the most part.
all right.
But I've got a Lake Placid shoot that I'm going to be doing in June. So, that's going to take me into upstate New York
Yeah.
for an architect that I've shot, 5 or 6 other jobs for them. So it's, for the most part, regional, though somebody
Nice.
who's working for Nike asked me if I can go to Portland. Sure, I can get on a plane and go to Portland. And my consulting business had me flying all over the place. So I
Hmm.
can, fly with cameras.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole different discussion.
It is. It is.
Yeah. Well, that's really amazing. Um, so what's next for you, Jack? Where do you go from here? Is this is this the end game for you? Is to be a landscape and architectural photographer, or is there something on the horizon?
I never know what the next thing on the horizon is.
Okay.
At some point I'll go, I need to do X. When I was a management consultant, I had figured out how to measure hard to measure work, like
Hmm.
research scientists, design engineers, graphic artists, and teams. Um,
Okay.
and once I figured out how to do that, then I decided to write a book to teach people how to do it. And then I
Oh.
said, well, I could do workshops and I could train people to do this. And I would train trainers so that they could spread that technology throughout an organization.
Hmm.
Um, so I might end up teaching, or I might end up mentoring, or creating an online course. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know, but right now I enjoy doing this, and I'm going
Yeah.
to keep doing it and learning how to do it better and experimenting with marketing. I'm about to automate my LinkedIn marketing.
Oh,
and
okay.
and there's a whole new technology there that I'm going to go
Yeah,
play with. Uh,
there is.
not posting, but
Mhm.
this is actually reaching out to second and third level connections, contacting them, connecting with them, and then automating the communication with them to just get more prospects into my funnel.
That's great.
Um, so that'll be a new thing I get to learn.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing. Well, you have a lot to offer. Somebody would be really lucky to be able to bend your ear for a while, as we have been here today, and I really appreciate it. For those of you who joined us late, this is Jack Zigon, and we're so glad that you took time to chat with us today. This has been really valuable. I hope that photographers pay particular attention to the points you made about business and marketing and those kinds of things. We haven't talked a lot about aesthetics, but I would refer people to your website for that, because you have a spectacular website and your work is amazing. So I will put the link to your website in the description for this podcast and the video that appears on YouTube, and then they can go from there. But Jack, thank you for your time. This has been a pleasure, and we hope to see you again soon, and hopefully in another iteration of the Jack Zigon stories.
Well, thank you for taking the time to give me this opportunity to share a couple of things I've learned.
I appreciate it.
It's been great, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted, and may not be used in full or in part, without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.